Hello and welcome to the CNBC TV 18's Mumbai Newsroom. I am Sonal Bhutra. You're watching MF Corner. Today we are going to talk about a very interesting retirement survey by PGIM Asset Managers. Around 67% of the respondents in the survey say they have planned for retirement as compared to 49% in the 2020 survey. So there definitely is a positive update. Also, the findings showed that investments in mutual funds have jumped to 23% from 10%. That is something that people are looking at from a retirement perspective as well. So let's understand, why is retirement planning crucial, what age should you start it at, and what really are the findings of this particular report. We asked this and more with a guest today in the studio, Ajit Menon, the Chief Executive Officer of PGIM India Asset Management. Mr. Menon, a pleasure to have you with us in the studio, and thank you so much for joining us on MF Corner and discussing something that is so important, right?
Thank you so much for having me here. Yes,
we talk about financial savings, we talk about expenses, but rarely do we talk about retirement planning, right? So what is the big takeaway for you from this retirement survey? Where does India stand here? At what age are people looking at saving for retirement?
Well, like you mentioned, Sonal, at the beginning of the show, that 67% of our respondents said that they felt ready for retirement. When we did this survey 2 years ago and published it in 2020, the number of people who felt ready for retirement was 49%. So a jump from 49 to 67 is very encouraging when it comes to India. And there are there are some statistics that may be available at a global level, but if I were to look at our own parent, PGIM, when they did a poll in 2023 in the US, they found that 70% of people are planning to retire but don't feel ready for retirement. So compared to that in India, when 67% feel ready, well, that's an encouraging sign. But to me, I think, Sonal, there are certain other dimensions which have changed, and we could see that change pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. And I think the most significant change that we have seen is a need for self-identity. When you're thinking about money, when you're thinking about financial goals, the roles and responsibilities are defined as my family. And for the first time, what we are seeing is people saying, what about me? And what should I be doing for myself? So people want to be in control of their finances, but they don't want to let go of their personal aspirations as well. So that's a new dimension that's moved in. The other aspect that we have noted when we think about retirement is that people who have secondary sources of income always feel more confident about their future and their retirement than those who don't. And 36% of the respondents that we had said they have a secondary source of income. A large percentage of that, more than 42%, say that secondary source comes from their financial investments. So that's also a good trend to sort of see. But I do think that what's more encouraging is that almost 39% of people beyond that 36 said we are thinking about a secondary source of income. And that's very critical for being more confident and more financially secure about your future. The only aspect I do think that as a mutual fund person, when I look at it, I find that only 1/3 of people have taken formal advice from a financial advisor. And so if it's just 1/3 people taking advice, the other interesting thing, and I'm really jealous of my insurance friends here, is that 75% of those people have taken advice from an insurance advisor or agent, and very few from, say, mutual fund distributors or registered investment advisors. So, well, in another sense, the scope is pretty wide and big. And I think that one very interesting other aspect, which might be unique to India, I would say, is that people who come from joint families, they sort of feel less anxious about their financial future. In this particular survey, however, we found a drop. So still, 70% of people who live in joint families say we feel financially secure. But we did find, compared to an earlier survey, that nuclear families are finding themselves probably more confident. I guess it's because of the challenges that they would have faced during the pandemic and the responsibilities that they had. So broadly, these are the key highlights that we found.
And the big number that you spoke about, only 1/3 take their advice coming in from mutual fund distributors and 2/3 from insurers is what you
Out of that 1/3, 2/3 of them taken from insurance.
Okay, that's interesting. Yes. So we'll discuss that as well. But if we talk about the income allocation, how do Indians allocate their income currently, and where do mutual funds stand in the picture? Because mutual funds have picked up. We've seen that in the SIP numbers. Are you seeing that in the retirement plans that people have as well?
We are seeing it in not just retirement plans, but just since this survey was not just about the readiness to retirement, but overall financial well-being, and we did sort of go through the numbers there, what we found is that between our 2020 survey and our 2023 survey, there was not too much of a difference between the allocations that people made. Expenses were still around 59% of household income, so to speak, was the same pretty much in the earlier survey as well. What's probably changed is loans and liabilities a bit. Within that 59, loans and liabilities have risen. And I think that there is even the more recent RBI surveys and things talking about the fact that liabilities have gone up. But let me add a very interesting dimension to that as well, Sonal. What we find is that people, when I talk about expressing self-identity, people taking educational loans or taking or borrowing for upskilling themselves has risen. It's about 5% of those kind of liabilities and loans. So while liabilities and loans have risen, and what we're seeing is that this expression of self-identity, which is what about me, what about myself, doing something for themselves, reskilling, upskilling, or taking an education loan to study further, has sort of risen. Of course, I think one commonsensical sort of change that we saw was that since everybody was working from home, rental liabilities sort of fell because you had a lot of people saying, work from home, let's go back to dad's place and, sack out. So you don't have to, spend on rent per se. So that did drop, and I don't know how that will probably hold when we do surveys. We'll have to look at how it is when we do surveys further. But overall, within investments and your question around mutual funds, Indians still prefer fixed deposits and insurance and annuities and gold before they come to more mutual funds. But said that, huge shift in mutual funds. Just as you alluded to the growth in SIPs, we found that in our previous survey when there was about 10% people saying that we use mutual funds, 23% of people here were saying that we use mutual funds. And it is higher in those people who say they're ready for retirement. So I think that's an interesting aspect. If you look at percentages, from all the 3,000 plus people that we surveyed, when you look at 50% or more people are saying they're in fixed deposits, they are in insurance and annuities, they are in gold. You look at the 20s to 50s, and it is postal savings that come up. And mutual funds have come up from that, from the below 20s into the 20s to 50s, which is encouraging. We did see a shift for NPS as well, from a low 5 to a 15%. PPFs remain somewhere around 13%, but that's also risen from where it was. So definitely some awareness happening, but long way to go.
Long way to go, definitely. And that's why we have this conversation as well, right, as to how we can go ahead and plan for retirement. Not only that, just financial savings in general and financial security. So you did speak about, how people have changed the practices when it comes to savings, when it comes to expenditure. What is the difference between traditional practices of savings and evolved practices? What is the change that you've seen in the last couple of years?
The shift, yes. One way to think about it is that the sort of 4 pillars, so to speak, is your savings, your expenses, your protection, and your investments. So when you think about that, I think savings in the traditional sense meant that you keep a surplus for emergencies, so to speak. But what we're seeing in this survey, both from a qualitative aspect as well as the quantitative aspect, is people are using those savings for expenses, short-term expenses. So when we think about that self-identity dimension that I spoke about, I think people, if they like something, they're going to go for it because they're using their savings for that. And we see that reflected in consumption, I guess. When it comes to expenses, I think it was very loosely tracked before. And what we are seeing in our survey is that people are getting a little more conscious when they go for high-value purchases. It is the younger amongst the respondents who are going for gadgets and, let's say televisions and, other gadgets and equipment that you would need for your house. But when it comes to the older generations, I think what we are looking at is that people are getting more conscious when they're spending on big-ticket items. So they're being conscious about it, and that's a good one. When it comes to protection, it was from a new point of view, I think people are trying to make things more comprehensive. Protection was about, do I have a corpus that will help me? But now protection is about, forget the corpus. I mean, I need that, but I need to secure my life. I need to secure my health, not just me, but my family. So I think that awareness has grown. And when it comes to investments, I think that the new mantra is, we want to make more money. And while it was in the traditional sense, it was about, let me not lose the corpus that I have. Let me look for capital protection in some ways. Now, I think the new mantra is, well, we need to make money as well. And we're seeing this in lower income groups. So, you know, when you do a survey around 3,000 people, you have different monthly income groups. The average income of this group, by the way, is around the 10 lakh mark. So one should be conscious about thinking about it. It can be very different for different income groups. But I think what can be said is that lower your income, the more you are really focused around trying to make returns and trying to make that corpus fast. The higher your income, you are thinking aspirationally about travel, you're thinking about promotions, you're thinking about moving up in life. And I think those are the nuances we've seen between traditional and the new.
You know, I thought that making money has always been the goal, be it pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, or during pandemic. But of course, I do take your point. There's been a big change, a shift in the mentality or the way we look at investing overall as well. We'll do one thing. We'll continue this interesting conversation. We have to get into a quick commercial break. And on the other side, we'll continue our discussion with Ajit Menon on their retirement survey. Stay tuned for that. Welcome back. You're still tuned into MF Corner. We still have with us Ajit Menon of PGIM India Asset Management on their retirement survey. It's been a very interesting survey which spoke about how Indians are looking at retirement investments, how they're looking at different investment avenues, and what has led to that change. So, Mr. Menon, the first question then comes after we've come back from the break is, why is retirement planning critical? Does the current investment not take care of our future needs then?
So let me put it this way to the audience. You have many financial goals in life for your children, especially for their studies, their marriage, to buy a house, to buy a car, retirement. All of these are financial goals. Think about it this way for the audience. Retirement is the only financial goal for which you don't get a conventional loan. Every other goal, imagine you're doing your SIPs and lump sum for your kids or for your house. If you fell short, you can fill it with a loan. You can't fill the hole that you may have for your retirement with a conventional loan. You have things like reverse mortgage, which are not very mature products per se. So I think the criticality of planning for retirement is this. You do not get a loan for retirement as a financial goal. The second aspect, I think, is regarding how we are living our lives and longevity. It's a global aspect, so to speak, that people are living longer in today's world. And therefore, I think longevity risk is underappreciated. We typically tend to think if we have a corpus, well, you know, after I hang up my boots, I'm, you know, another 20 or 25 years. But there was a very interesting, I don't know if you remember this, there was this Time magazine 2015 cover with a baby's photograph that said that this baby is going to live to 142.
Oh.
So imagine for the newer generations in our audience, I think that the key is, it's going to be tough. You're going to live longer. So, you know, you got to make your money last. Apart from that, I think for countries, for other stakeholders, just the demographics of a country is a challenge, and the fact that healthcare costs are going up. Inflation, as we have seen it rear its head globally and in India over the last 2 years. And these are challenges which make planning for retirement extremely critical for people.
You know, never thought living longer will be an issue. You'll have to think so much. But of course, I do take your points. In that case, when we are talking about this behavioral shift that's coming by, what are Indians preferring as an investment tool when it comes to retirement benefits?
So as we mentioned earlier, I think it is encouraging to see that for people who are planning, mutual funds are becoming a slightly bigger option for them, from 10% to 23%. We saw that rise. But what we have seen through our surveys is that the tendency or the preference is still for fixed deposits or insurance and annuities, or then gold, which has risen quite a bit in the last couple of years between the two surveys that we saw as well. So I think that when people think about retirement and look at their options, that's how people are thinking about it. We are glad to see that NPS is rising as well. PPF is also beginning to see a shift between the last survey and this survey. From a government point of view, while you have, the NPS, then you have some mutual fund schemes which are designated, and then you have insurance. Those are the three buckets under which people would think about products when they think about investing. But our surveys say it's still fixed deposits and insurance and annuities, but I'm glad to see mutual funds rising within that data.
Oh, yes. So when we talk about just the mutual fund category, do we need a different dedicated category for retirement? We do have some schemes that have come up as well. And within the planning for retirement, what are some of the schemes that investors can look at for retirement?
So, the answer to your question is that technically we don't need anything specific. What you probably need is a good diversified equity fund, or if you're conservative, go for something like a dynamic asset allocation or a multi-asset allocation product. But practically, I think as human beings, we would do better if we end up putting things in buckets. So when we think about, and I would guess that the reason why so many people are looking at insurance and taking advice there is because there's so much that industry has done with retirement as its focus and the way they advertise around it. We do have a retirement category in mutual funds as well, and I think that's a fantastic category for people to think for one reason, which is that it's got a 5-year lock-in, and up to your age of retirement. After retirement, it doesn't have a lock-in, but if you're investing anytime before that, between 20 and 60 or so, then you would have a 5-year lock-in. And the reason I'm saying that that's good, like the ELSS funds, which have a 3-year lock-in, a shorter lock-in, is that lock-ins allow you to be disciplined about not touching that money which is for the long term. But because otherwise everything in our industry is open-ended, and people tend to then dip into it if they feel that there is some short-term requirement of a vacation coming up, or something that they want to buy. So I think it's important for people to think about some habit hacks, so to speak, while investing for the long term. Put it into a lock-in product, not necessarily 15 years or whatever, but retirement funds in the industry which have a 5-year lock-in up to the age of retirement, or ELSS schemes. Good diversified products are good enough for people to think about saving in their, all through their earning years. Post-retirement, I think that you need a little bit more nuanced approach where advisors can help in terms of allocating your money into sort of different products.
So you briefly mentioned dynamic allocation, right? How does dynamic allocation, how important it is when it comes to investing for retirement purposes particularly?
So two aspects. One is when you're thinking about people who are currently working and planning to invest for retirement, I'm sure that there'll be a large percentage of those people who are conservative, so to speak. And as we saw in our survey, more people still follow fixed deposits and insurance and things like that. I think that dynamic asset allocation products, the balanced advantage fund category, the multi-asset allocation products, are good products for people who are in their earning years but are conservative in their approach towards investing for the long term. If they have 10 or 15 or 20 years, a good diversified equity fund should suffice. So therefore, balanced and asset allocation kind of products are better for conservative investors. Post-retirement, I think everybody can benefit from a balanced advantage or a dynamic asset allocation product, because it takes away that risk of timing the market, as we all know, and it sort of gets out when the markets are expensive, gets in when markets are cheap, so it auto-balances. The way I think about it is, post the pandemic, our lives become hybrid. Our cars have become hybrid. I think our investments can be hybrid. And, it can fill it, shut it, forget it kind of an approach can be useful. And these products are therefore very useful for conservative to moderate investors in both phases of their lives. And
hybrid funds have been doing well. So clearly, people are moving towards the hybrid lifestyle, hybrid way of investing as well, right? So, the last question before I let you go is, are mutual funds the way for financial planning when it comes to retirement? Or do you think it should be a mix of all the other categories that you mentioned? Though mutual funds are there, but as you said, people are still preferring fixed deposits. There's annuities as well. NPS also has come up. And what are the benefits of a dedicated mutual fund which is only for retirement purposes?
Sure. I think that the advantage of a dedicated retirement fund within the mutual fund space is that it does give you, if there are very few funds within that which can give you a tax benefit. I think the Association of Mutual Funds in India have already made a recommendation, continue to make a recommendation to the Ministry of Finance to have mutual fund linked retirement plans, which can have additional tax benefit of 80 CCD and things like that. Not happened as yet, so that's not available. But otherwise, I think the benefit of the retirement scheme is, as I mentioned earlier, the 5-year lock-in that keeps it as a default feature to break your habit of trying to pull your money out earlier. The longer you stay, you get the effects of compounding. But in general, when we look at retirement, I would say that there is, how much mutual funds play a part. There's an unconventional answer to it and a conventional. The unconventional one is, I think one needs to drop this word retirement. Our survey is saying that people plan for happy outcomes. And retirement is a negative word for a lot of people, especially in jobs. Maybe they don't like their boss's face or whatever. But it's a negative word for a lot of people. I do think that we need to maybe reframe it as financial freedom, like many of our advisors do within the mutual fund industry already. And I also think that we should reimagine retirement as retiring from your primary job.
Right.
I think continuing to work with something you love and whatever you earn from it is a great strategy when you start thinking about not wanting to be dependent on your family or your kids. And if you're going to live longer, that's a surefire way to make sure that you have finances. But otherwise, mutual funds is available for your traditional investing. But getting a good financial advisor is probably the secret to it all. I have a financial advisor I've been using for more than 10 years now. And I think every individual and every household is unique. In a program like this, it's very difficult to cover for each unique instance. That's where the advisor plays the biggest role.
Okay, we totally take that point, and we would have loved to chat a little more, but completely out of time. Thank you so much, Mr. Menon, for coming down here and speaking to us about everything that comes to this investing. We'll take your leave on this edition of MF Corner. Stay tuned for Closing Bell to take you through the last hour of trade.